Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
This is an honor right now. Dean Maki joins us now, Chief Economist at Point72, Steve Cohen's shop. And we're thrilled he's there. And we can make jokes about Juan Soto and all that with the New York Mets, except this is too important of a conversation. So, Dean, you're sitting down with Mr. Cohen, and he's looking like, I got to write out $700 million large. And so did you say, quote, this data, Steve, suggests some scope for a pickup in real consumer spending growth over the next, 51 years? The length of the contract. I mean, Dean, did you pitch Steve Cohen an optimism on American economic growth so he could sign the great Soto?
I'm afraid I didn't give him specific advice on that signing.
The transaction, okay.
Economic.
Well, let's go to the heart of it, which is whether it's Juan Soto or any other sports type or business planning, it's based on animal spirit. Do you see nominal GDP falling down to some distressed level?
Not at this point, no. I think the momentum is quite solid in the economy right now. There may be some headwinds next year, depending on how much tariffs are put in place, how much immigration restrictions are put in place. But as of right now, the momentum in the economy is quite strong.
Hey, Dean, did you and your team, when you woke up the day after the election and we have President Trump coming back to the White House, we now have a pretty solid red wave, I guess, in the House and the Senate. Did that change your economic outlook for 2025 at all?
I think the main things that I'm concerned about is the magnitude of the tariffs and the immigration restrictions, because tariffs do, virtually any economist will tell you tariffs will lead to price increases and slower growth. So we're just going to have to wait and see how much those are put in place. Immigration restrictions also mean slower growth in the labor supply. And that means either job growth is going to be slower, or it means that the labor market is going to tighten much faster than it has been. So those are the things that I'm concerned about looking forward.
So given that backdrop, what do you think your Federal Reserve is going to do here in this December meeting, and then maybe in that first half of next year?
Yeah, so we think that the Fed will cut next week, unless the CPI and PPI numbers point to a really ugly core PCE reading for November. But if that's sort of in line with where it's been, then I think the Fed does plan to cut, and they will do so. But we also think they're going to switch to a quarterly pace of rate cuts starting in Q1. Right. So they'll slow down the pace of cuts and just watch to see what happens on the inflation front.
Dean, the Maki economics is a Stanford economics. In the whole heart of Boskin, Taylor, the other giants of Stanford, even over on the financial side with Bill Sharp, is get out of the way and let us grow. So if President-elect Trump says to Steve Cohen as he's trying to get season tickets because of Juan Soto, if President-elect Trump says get out of the way and let the economy grow, does that ring true to you that could happen?
I think the economy is growing quite solidly right now, and that will continue absent any shocks. So I think that the momentum is quite solid. Consumers have strong wage and salary income growth. Corporate profits are very strong. So the setup is quite nice for continued growth, as long as policy, in a sense, doesn't interfere with it.
Yeah, but I got to go Pete Peterson on you, the late great Pete Peterson. Dean Maki, whether it's charge card debt or the fiscal debt of the nation, are we grossing up our debt while we enjoy the Maki boom?
I mean, there is a long-run fiscal issue in the U.S. We're running deficits that are too high in general, and they don't seem to be coming down in a significant way. And it doesn't seem to be a major part of the agenda for either party at this point. So I do think that's a long-run issue. It doesn't seem to be a short-term issue that's preventing investors from buying treasuries at this point. So that will be the true test, is when investors say, we think the debt is too high. Right now, they're not saying that. The 10-year treasury yield is 4.15 or something like that. And so it's not as though investors are balking at buying treasuries.
Dean, what's your view of this underlying U.S. consumer here? We're kind of right in the holiday period. People are out there buying gifts for Christmas and Hanukkah and all the other things. How do you view the consumer these days?
I think the consumer is in quite solid shape. Wage and salary income is growing something like 5.5%, and headline inflation has fallen down to, on a short-term basis, under 2%. So real income growth, labor income growth is quite strong at this point. Plus, the household wealth to income right now is higher than it's been at any point in the 70 years prior to COVID. So households are wealthier than they've ever been on average, and they have strong income growth. So that's why I think consumer spending has been strong and will continue to be so going forward.
Dean, when you're at the Mets Stadium, because you have to go to 10 games a year to keep your job, do you sit in the clover seats? Oberman sits down there. The clover,
Wow.
the Clover Club seats right down like row 1, row 4. Is that where you sit?
I have sat in those seats at times. They are very, very nice seats.
See,
I love it. Dean Maki, thank you so much. I love busting his chops. It is great. May I point out, folks, that Dr. Maki has bulletproof academics from his time at Barclays. Mr. Cohen saw that and said, bring that lad over to 0.72, and he's delivered the goods for Mr. Cohen in giving great macroeconomic analysis tied into the policies of America. We hope to see Mr. Maki at the Clover Club seats.
Yes.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Or watch us live on YouTube.
Last time she was in, I learned a lot, plain and simple. Monica Guerra joins us, Executive Director, Head of U.S. Policy at Morgan Stanley Wealth. And there's like 18 things to talk about here, but I'm sorry, I got to rip up the script. Greg Villiers over at AGF Toronto comes out today with a blistering summary of what we all know, but I guess we're ignoring. $2 trillion budget deficit. How will that impinge on policy? What is the constraint of a budget deficit that is up $242 billion more than in the same period last year? What's the constraint?
It means that they're going to have to actually deal with it. And I think what's interesting about this incoming administration and Congress is that there's a lot of commitment to actually getting a budget through. We've been living on continuing resolutions over the past year or longer. And essentially with the reconsideration of taxes, as well as tariff revenues, et cetera, they're going to have to actually come up with a full budget package that is going to have to take the deficit into consideration. So the constraint is, how much do we add to the deficit, and how do we make up for those losses?
Do you see any ability to go, forget about cutting deficits and all the, the people that want to do that. Everybody says it's not going to happen. Can we flatline?
Can we flatline? No, I would say if you're thinking about, I'm thinking about what flatline means, right? If we're thinking about faith in U.S. Treasuries and the global marketplace, I don't think we're at a critical tipping point yet. They have to consider the impacts of deportation and immigration policies, as well as how tariffs could impact inflation, and then package that in with tax cuts and how they're going to negotiate spending cuts as well, and then that's going to get you to a place of, are we in the red or the black? And either any way you shake it, we're going to add. It's just how much. And even if you're looking at, say, $1 trillion deficit over addition over 10 years, that would be on the bright side. And it's about essentially making sure productivity is strong, as well as management of inflation, and that's going to keep global investors, right, still turning to the dollar, still turning to U.S. Treasuries. So yes, taxes are important, deficits are important, but it's about sort of the management in relationship to productivity and inflation. And I think that those three prongs sometimes get missed in the soup of the discussion.
You're head of U.S. policy at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. What's the first 100 days going to look like of this new administration? I mean, he's going to have the House, the Senate, yes, very narrow majorities, but still majorities. What can this administration get done in the first 100 days, do you think?
If you're looking at the executive branch, there's a lot that they can do, right? Immigration is day one. That's going to be a real change. We have to think about how much that looks like. If you're thinking annually, about 300,000 people get deported from the U.S. already. Okay. If they're looking at a 400,000 number is what they've most recently cited, that could be in addition, that could be net 100,000 more. So those are very different outcomes when we're thinking about near-term growth and growth prospects. The other thing they're going to focus on with day one is tariffs, and especially the way that we negotiate and reconsider our relationship with Mexico. So one of the things I've heard from DHS as it relates to immigration is that they're going to be focusing on Central Americans, not necessarily Mexicans, because we need them for mining, commodities, rare minerals, etc. So this is going to be a dynamic first 100 days. The Doge effect that people talked about, I think that's much later, because they're going to use those first 100 days to come up with proposals before Congress actually considers them. And then we're going to see the first writings on the wall of what those tax and budget conversations look like. So I think first 100 days is really about creating the path forward and that map that we're going to follow through 2026 and 2027.
Are we going to have a messy confirmation process for some of these appointees? And that could derail maybe some of these policy decisions?
I think they're getting ahead of it, right?
Okay.
This was the sort of the quickest we've seen in recent history of folks being put forward and then dropping out of contention for secretary positions. This is sort of record rates of turnover before the administration even gets into office. The critical thing here is that Trump is putting forth his personal picks and then responding to the limits that are being presented to him in Congress. So Senator John Thune, as majority leader, is incredibly important in the Senate. And it's essentially creating this barrier, right, to some of the more outlier appointees. And he's saying if you don't get, if they don't necessarily meet basic standard of background, education, understanding, we're not going to confirm them. And the fact that he was actually voted on, right, by GOP members, right, to become the Senate Majority Leader, that means that folks are interested in maintaining a certain amount of independence and legislative authority in the Senate.
And the time we've got left, I've got to go to your earned experience on the great city of New York. We've just had a huge crime that's the focus worldwide, but far more of that is just running the city into 2025. When you look at the concerns of our fiscal policy here, what's at the top of the list for Monica Guerra?
If we're thinking about fiscal policy, the first thing that comes to mind is, management of the broader agencies. When you're talking about, the most recent crime, I think that that's top of mind for a lot of folks of making sure that the city is safe. Now, from a fiscal perspective, top news headline, right, is congestion pricing, right? Yep. And are they going to be able to bring in enough revenue? Are they going to be able to actually implement it on Jan 5? So we're going to be watching that. What do you think? I think if they can do it, right? There's a path forward.
To me, the distinction here is they're modeling off Stockholm and London. Our taxi cabs are third world compared to London. Isn't there like a bargain here of alternative transportation that we're supposed to have, like Stockholm and like London, as we implement this good congestion tax?
So that's the thing, is that you need to, for the way we're thinking about the MTA and the way the state is focusing on is that we need to get the congestion tax first, get those revenues in, and then they can secure that against debt that can essentially build out, right, and help the MTA.
Brilliantly said. With all your experience, is that doable?
I think it is. I do think it's doable. I think that I don't know the ins and outs of the implementation for taxis. Maybe what they're going to do is have everybody download an app. I don't know what that looks like. That's the easiest thing I can think of. I don't want to speak on behalf of this of the city and the state for that.
I understand.
But I do think that there are ways to get there. And if you bring in 500 mil as the latest, guesstimate of what they could bring in, that is worthwhile considering the losses that the MTA has experienced.
Where are we on subway? I mean, to me, I'm a subway rider every single day for 45 years. I think it's the greatest mode of transportation in the world. I think I'm in a minority there. How is the MTA these days, just broadly defined?
Broadly defined, I think they're still struggling with some of those, COVID losses.
Yep.
And they're going to be, looking to essentially patch that revenue. They were already in a budget imbalance prior to COVID. It just made it worse. And so something like congestion pricing might be necessary to essentially keep service at a level that's tenable and then go beyond. So if they're able to actually use that revenue to secure billions in debt, then you have a robust capital plan. But they have to find that revenue, and I think that could come from congestion pricing.
Thank you for that audible. Monica Guerra is with Morgan Stanley on U.S. policy. We should mention also that she held the position of Director of Capital Budget and Economic Development for the City of New York, among other duties.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Joining us right now, Ellen Wald, Senior Fellow of the Atlantic Council. And what's great is we look at the complete total turmoil of the Eastern Mediterranean. I don't even know where to start. I've been transfixed by it for 5 days, 6 days. We've had some great guests, including yesterday. Ellen Wald is definitive. Her one volume on the Saudi royalty, Saudi, is just absolutely definitive, and of course on oil in that. Ellen, I get out the distance from Latakia and the Russian port, and I get over to Tripoli and Tobruk in Libya, and the Russians have to move 800 miles to reset up their bases, perhaps. What is the significance of that to the Arab world, that Russia, ally of the former Syria, has to move? What's the so what of that?
I think the so what is that there is an opportunity here to fill a small power vacuum that had been filled by Iran and Russia. When Iran turned around that oil tanker, just as news that Assad had left Syria hit, that was a sign that they are not supporting this regime anymore. Russia retreating, another sign. I think that it's both a lack of resources, I think, on the part of Russia, but and also a strategic decision here. And that says to me that there is an opportunity here for Saudi Arabia and also the Gulf states to potentially move in. They've got money, they've got fuel, they've got aid, and they could be the definitive force in the new Syria.
Right.
And this is an opportunity they may not want to let pass them by.
I mean, the drama for some of us is Peter O'Toole as T.E. Lawrence going mental over Sykes-Picot and the partition of Syria. 5, 6, 8 years later from that, you have the true partition of Syria. Do you just assume, maybe led by the Saudis, we're going to have a new partition of Syria?
That's an interesting thought. I think one of the things that we've learned is that despite the fact that all of these borders and all of these lines were drawn, by the British, although the Sykes-Picot Agreement, everyone forgets that there was actually the Sykes-Picot-Sazonov Agreement, and that Russia was originally part of it. So Russia's got a hand in that too. Is that these lines are actually here to stay, as arbitrary and bizarre they may have been. They're here to stay, and so I don't think that Syria is going to be divided or any different, or the borders will look all that different. I do think that the recent Israeli encroachment in the north of Israel to kind of extend their buffer there is interesting and could be a source of tension in the future. But I do think that Lebanon is going to remain Lebanon and Syria will remain Syria. What it looks like and how strong of a state it is remains to be seen.
Ellen, I don't know. I'm pretty surprised that with all the turmoil we've seen in the Middle East over the last year and now most recently with Syria, I still got Brent crude at like $71, $72 a barrel. I'm surprised it's not a lot higher. Should I be surprised, or what's going on there?
Well, what's interesting is that, yes, it's an important and a major event in the Middle East and definitely injects more instability into the region, despite the fact that Assad's rule was not what it once was and that he was a very brutal dictator. He was still a fairly stabilizing force. At the same time, though, Syria is not a major oil producer. It had enough oil and natural gas to satisfy its own needs, and I think they exported a little bit, but it's not a major producer. And I do think that at this point, really what we're seeing is that analysts are much more concerned with, troubling economic forecasts, and also these forecasts that supply is set to grow in 2025, and this potential for a supply, an oversupply. And they're much more focused on that than they are with, with what's going on in Syria as a destabilizer for the oil market.
Ellen, I play off Sergei Vakulenko's work at Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And the basic idea here is we knew OPEC Plus, which I guess is Riyadh talked to Moscow. Is that dead?
OPEC Plus is not dead. OPEC Plus seems very much alive. The fact that they were able to put together such a comprehensive agreement, and a complicated one as well, to stave off these planned production increases, I think shows that there's still a lot of negotiation going on. There's still a lot of open lines of communication. And OPEC Plus is still alive and kicking, although for every month that they push off the planned increases, the pressure is going to grow to eventually put that oil back on the market.
Ellen, I'm a big fan of the TV series Landman on Paramount Plus, so I feel like I'm an expert now in the U.S. oil and gas industry. What are our domestic folks, our friends down in Texas and Louisiana and Oklahoma, are they still pumping the maximum amount of oil they can? What are they doing down there?
So right now we're seeing U.S. production at some of its highest levels ever. I mean, we are currently the largest oil producer in the world. The question is, how long is that going to be sustained, particularly now that the region down there is dominated by large, international oil players. We're talking Chevron and Exxon are really dominating now that they have bought out some of the small and larger players in the fracking area. So I think that their concerns, for example, Chevron says they want to focus on free cash flow, not production, not drilling. And I do think that we are likely to see a pullback in some respects, although there's still going to be, strong production coming from there. I know some concerns have been voiced about the fact that, the easy oil in the Permian is just about used up, but, that doesn't mean that there's no oil left and that we're not going to be producing from there for a long time.
So is there a glut of oil?
I don't think we're quite in glut stage, but there's the potential to get there.
So,
we're in a pre-glut phase.
Pre-glut.
I think what's been great in the last 10 years, the U.S. going from a net importer to a net exporter. Yeah, exactly. Who talks about peak oil anymore?
I talked to Ellen Wald like 20 years ago. I'm going peak oil, peak oil, peak. She says, shut up, Tom.
Yeah, watch Lawman. That's what,
Ellen
everything
Wald.
you need to know about the
Ellen, when do we get a new book? When do we get an update? Come on.
When do we get a new book? That's a good question. Not yet, but we've definitely got some interesting other things in the fire right now.
Very cool, Ellen. And Netflix is looking for that.
Yep.
Ellen Wald with us, your senior fellow at Atlantic Council. Her one-volume Saudi, really can't say. Oh, thank you, Ari. Saudi Inc. I'm sorry. I did it for the Netflix series. They changed it from Saudi Inc.
shorter.
Saudi.
Yep, exactly.
Right.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.
The daily look at the front pages. It is the Lisa Mateo Hour. Lisa, what do you got?
All right, we got to go to Juan Soto and the Mets, right? Thank you to Ari for pointing this article out. Big shout out there. So yes, the Mets offered the most money for Juan Soto, right? Outbidding the Yankees by about $5 million. But
really,
it could have been more
$5
than
million
that.
was the difference?
No, it could have been more than that. See, it could be the perk of a suite for his family. That could have been the game changer. Because opposed to saying that Mets over Steve Cohen, he gave that green light for Soto and his family to get Citi Field for his family. That part of the deal. The suite, okay, that's what he wanted. He wanted the suite. The Yankees wouldn't give it to him.
You mean like above third
yes,
base?
like 16 tickets.
This is
suite.
In the railing, and they serve food.
The fancy. There's anywhere at Citi Field from about 3,200 to about 13,000. It'll cost.
It's right
depending
next
on the game.
to Scott Haven's suite. He runs the place for Steve.
Okay.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, the Yankees don't give suites to their players. Derek Jeter.
Yeah,
Aaron Judge,
they pay for theirs.
They pay for it. Now, discounted rates, but
Sure.
they pay for it, so they didn't want to create this precedent, I guess. So
Yeah, they were willing to do the discounted rate, but you know
Okay.
what? He said no.
Very cool.
I want it as part of my deal.
Yes,
So
exactly. All
this
The only
is the
question
thing.
to me is it towards home plate from Scott Havens, Suet, or is it out farther down third baseline?
Yeah, that's a good
That's a
question.
good
We'll see.
question. I don't know exactly where it is, but any kind of suite is nice if you
Okay,
ask
next.
me. But it is. It's pretty pricey. But the Yankees, 8,000 to 20,000. That's how
Of
much
course,
their
and
suites
their
go
suites
for.
are all sold. I'm not
God.
sure about the Mets, quite frankly.
Yes, maybe now they will. There you go.
Yes, good point.
Okay, this is from the Wall Street Journal. Two most dreaded words when you get a text is when someone texts you, "Call me."
Oh boy.
Does that annoy you? Like,
Or
you don't know the urgency. You don't
Right.
know how important it is. So that's to say that it's all over social media now, the whole call me thing. I get it because my son texts me, "Call me," and I'm going on my phone. I'm like, something's wrong, and he wants to know where the peanut butter is. You know, so it's like it doesn't work. So they're saying you need to change up the text. Okay, you say, "Please call me, no rush." Okay?
Oh,
That's what
I
you
see.
do.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
please call me when you can. Okay,
It's
it's not
amazing.
Because nobody
important.
calls anymore. Everybody
No,
just texts.
it takes a few extra taps, people of the
Yeah.
thumbs. Come on, just put the extra wording.
It's amazing how the behavior's changed. I mean, it's absolutely. I mean,
Well, remember back in the day, when would you call your parents? Sunday. Sunday was always a time, like
No,
you're at
true,
school,
true. Yes.
you would call.
In college, I would call on Sundays.
And
Yeah,
they had
send
rates,
money.
would be in lower rates, like at nighttime on a Sunday night to call. Anyway, so I even now on Sundays, I try to reach out to the kids across the globe.
Oh, you do.
But it doesn't.
Good, even though they didn't call you for your birthday.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Except your daughter.
I'm
yeah.
eyeballing Apple here, up 26% this year. I mean, I don't know what percentage of our phones are Apple, but our behavior's really changed.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's really, really strange.
Yeah. A lot of people texting. They also say that the younger people are complaining because they're getting those call me texts from their parents who don't realize the text etiquette. And they're saying, "Mom, you can't just text call me. Like you have to tell
I can
me
do whatever
what."
I want to do.
There you go. There you go.
I'm in charge.
Oh, God.
You work for me.
This is like we're Dr. Phil
for
with
me.
Lisa.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
trauma in the Mateo household.
Stirring up
Next.
some controversy. Okay, global ad sales. They're actually set to top $1 trillion in 2024 thanks to online advertising. Sites like Alphabet's Google, Meta Platforms, Amazon. This is a report from Buyer Group, Group M.
Yep,
So
they're the
Google,
best.
Meta, Amazon share. Total global ad revenue now at 41%. But there's a reason for the boost in sales. And it's not because of political advertising. That wasn't the whole thing behind the boost. It's because of like the Paris Olympics. That was a big boost for it. Those ad-supported tiers where people are paying more to see the ads. That's another thing because they want to save a few bucks, so they'll pay more to have to see the ads. And also you have streaming services, Netflix, Comcast, Peacock. They're also good news because you had Comcast who showed the Olympics on broadcast TV, but also cable, and then also on Peacock as well. So global ad sales.
Yep,
topping
1 trillion. And
with a
again, the
T.
number that you mentioned, Lisa, the digital players, Google, Meta, Amazon, digital advertising.
So
their
where
total
are we,
share of
where
advertising
are we
is
in
41%.
5 years? Why should this trend stop?
Yeah, I don't think it will stop because actually, if you're an advertiser, it's never been better to advertise now because you have really good solutions for you. It's instead of buying an ad on a broadcast network, which you have no idea who you're reaching, if it's your demo or not. Now with these digital advertising platforms, Google, Meta, Amazon, YouTube, all that kind of stuff, you have much better information about who your audience is, and you can target it better. It's more valuable to the advertisers, and they're allocating more and more money. So and we saw yesterday, Tom, while you were out at yesterday, Omnicom, big ad agency, buying Interpublic Group.
Two dinosaurs mating?
Yep, exactly right.
If I go and I try to order something and I've got to go because I got to see who Steve Cohen's buying next, and about 2 hours later I get an email from the people, did you forget something?
Yep.
That's sort of like weird.
It is.
Do you have anything else in 50 seconds?
Yes, in 50 seconds. This is for the Gen Zers. I know you have in your household, okay? The Gen Z, 12 to 27, that's the age.
Oh, is that the age?
Yes, that's the age.
12 to 27.
They're becoming Gen G, which is for giving. They're very giving. That's what this I knew this would spark you. They're very giving. Apparently, this in the Financial Times. Here's a reason why. Because they're going to be the recipients of what financial advisors call the Great Wealth Transfer. Okay, that's when the retiring boomers pass down the trillions of dollars to their assets over the next 20 years.
And here's a great lead sentence in this Financial Times article by Marianne Willingham. Generation Z has been raised on a cocktail of climate panic, internet activism, and viral celebrity.
And that's why they want to give back.
That's a great lead.
Can we just get one of them to read a book, cover to cover?
Yeah.
They don't read?
No. But they're giving.
They're giving.
Yes.
We're giving too. Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. The newspapers.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live each weekday 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.